Welcome to the Polish Museum of America in Chicago, Illinois. I would like to invite you to learn about the Warsaw Uprising of August 1st, 1944. This was the largest resistance movement, but in particular the largest home army, Armia Krajowa, military organization in Europe during World War II. And after 5 years of German occupation, atrocities and massacres committed on the Polish population, the home army, Armia Krajowa, and the young people of Warsaw said enough is enough. And so they decided to drive the Germans out of Warsaw. They were poorly armed. The average age was about 19, 20 years of age. However, this was a very well thought through, deep decision based on the premise of the highest moral order, morality, justice, and solidarity. And for 63 days, young people fought to drive the Germans out of Warsaw. I would like to show you, take you on a short trip here in the museum, about 800 years of history in a moment to explain how the Polish character and what we call the Polski Kod Wolności, the Polish Code of Freedom, was shaped and built by Polish history. So let me take you on this odyssey. So here we have the Battle of Płowce, 1331. Actual soil from the battlefield. The great Polish king Ladislas, two Ladislauses, we'll be speaking about the first one, Władysław Ladislas Łokietek, the great unifier of the Polish nation, again in the 14th century. He was a great moral figure for the Polish knights, and so the prototype of the Polish knight was born, Florian Szary. And he will be the model for the next generation of Polish knights in the Battle of Grunwald, 1410. These are two battles. This is King Władysław Jagiełło, the victorious kings over the Teutonic Order, the Prussian Order, Teutonic Knights, Krzyżacy. And so the famous two Teutonic victors, you could say, the knight Zawisza Czarny and Zbyszko z Bogdańca, will become the models 500 years later for the modern day Warsaw Uprising fighters. People like Janek Bytnar-Rudy or Tadeusz Zawadzki Zośka, commanders of units, of platoons, again, very junior commanders who did most of the heavy lifting, you could say, during the Warsaw Uprising. Władysław Jagiełło, the victor of this great battle, married the Polish Queen Jadwiga, Queen Jadwiga of Poland, who is the only woman and the first and one and only monarch who organized, who funded a university, Jagiellonian University, in 1364. Why is this important? Because her team, her delegation, went to the Council of Konsultacje. This is just 4 years after this battle, so 1414, to defend the doctrine of just war, wojna sprawiedliwa, just war, that was used by her husband, King Władysław Jagiełło, against the Teutonic Order, on the grounds of the inalienable rights of people, of human beings endowed by their creator, rights like the right to freedom, the right to live in peace, the right to dignity, the right to worship. The Royal Holy Roman Empire and the Pope at that time agreed with Poland, agreed with the Polish position, because earlier they were under the influence of the narrative of the Teutonic Order, who used a kind of fake news campaign that they were out on missions to evangelize pagans. No, they weren't. They were just like Putin, who annexed Crimea. They were annexing sovereign territories. And so the Polish kingdom was hailed as a kingdom champion of human rights already in the 15th century. If we move to the 16th and 17th century of Polish history, Poland was way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of democratic values. Why? Because 10% of the social fabric of the Polish kingdom was the middle class already, as we would call it, the gentry, szlachta, whereas in France it was only 3%, in England it was only 1%. So this was a great base to develop the Polski Kod Wolności, the Polish Code of Freedom, And one of the greatest representatives of this gentry is the Pulaski family. So Casimir Pulaski, the great American hero in the future, he would become the father of American cavalry. He would lead against the British, the French and American troops, and he would beat the British at the Battle of Savannah. And we have this painting in our collection. But before that, he got a very good education at the Polish Warsaw Knights Academy. And his father, other officers, organized the first armed unit of the Polish gentry, Konfederacja Barska, and they would launch the very first Polish uprising against the Russian interventions. We have a marvelous Cossack masterpiece here in our collection, which shows the offensive led by the Russian Tsar Alexander and the Circassians against the Warsaw population. And saluting the Russian Tsar is a Prussian soldier. So that was already the union between the Russians and the Prussians. We would have the 19th century full of important uprisings that were trying to liberate Poland from these three occupiers, Prussia, Russia, and Austria-Hungary. And then we would have 1914, the famous march from the Oleandry in Kraków, march out of the Polish initial armed forces of Józef Piłsudski. Poland was not on the map yet. Poland was not on the map, and yet it already started its armed forces. 1918, we have the great Battle of Lwów here, again soil from the Battle of Lwów. It was a major city in Poland. Why is this important? Because you had young people, again, children, students defending Lwów. The Polish regiments arrived after a time. However, there was not enough soldiers to defend Lwów. So the Polish eaglets, Orlęta Lwowskie, they were a prefiguration, again, of the next generation in 20 years of the young fighters, the resistance movement of the Warsaw Uprising. This is very important because I would like to show you our children fighting, the children and their teenage, maybe 21-year-old teachers, instructors, and the kids were 10 years old. We just, last weekend, August 1st, in Poland, unveiled the graves of 5 children from the ages of 9 to 13 who fought and died in the Warsaw Uprising. So yes, Poland was a nation of gladiators. We had 8-year-old Zosia who threw a Molotov cocktail at a German tank, and the Germans returned by fire by shattering her lungs. So I wanted to say one more word about this very heavy figure, bronze figure of the small or the junior Warsaw Uprising fighter. This is someone who you should meet if you come to our museum. You can try to lift him yourself, but this is more of a metaphor. I want to pay tribute to the soldiers today who are still alive, who fought the Warsaw Uprising, Zawiszacy. Again, this name is maybe familiar, as I mentioned, the Knights of Grunwald, 1410, Zawisza Czarny. We have in Poland a kind of mentality where you say, można polegać jak na Zawiszy. You can count on me like on Zawisza, which means that these are the most important characteristics: honor, honesty, bravery, and loyalty. So I invite you to check out online 2 marvelous pieces in our foyer. One is a painting, actually a series of paintings by Irena Pokrzywnicka. Her nom de guerre was Irpo. She actually went back to Poland after showcasing her wonderful paintings here at the Polish Pavilion in New York in 1939 at the World Fair. She goes back to Poland and participates in the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. She paints Madonna Armii Krajowej. We also have a sculpture of a deer. Again, this is the great masterpiece by Józef Klukowski. He was an insurrection fighter, and he survived the Great Warsaw Uprising, dying later, being killed during transport to Bergen-Belsen, the German concentration camp. At the end of the month, August 31st, We're celebrating the birthday of Solidarity that was born in Gdańsk, so niech żyje Gdańsk. And I want to invite everyone to please join us online or in the future in person to celebrate Poland's great code of freedom, Polski Kod Wolności. Niech żyje Polska!